All right. Hello, welcome those who are joining in. There's some issue going on with StreamYards and Facebook. So we are only streaming to YouTube. I'm trying to see if I can go on Facebook and find the Buddhist Insights page and put the link and all that. Wait, I don't I have no power on that page. How am I supposed to do it? Anyway, it is what it is. All right. Hello, Louisa. Hello, Samsam. You were forgetful of the talk tonight. Well, I think all of the all the marketing that usually like making the events beforehand, it being on Facebook, and all that stuff has kind of fallen through. I just literally made this stream about 10 minutes ago, um, so I suspect we probably won't have as the full crew today, unless people just remember, hey, it's Wednesday night. We'll see. Hello, Amaranta, Lilani. Hello, Julie. We are only on YouTube today due to issues between Facebook and Streamlabs. Facebook always makes it really hard um, to do streaming on. I know from my own experience. My main event is on Monday night, and I couldn't go on Facebook. And we're just giving it a little bit of time for people to come in. Hello, Mary, Yankee, Metika. We'll get started in about a minute. All right. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, friends. So last week we went over dependent origination and dependent cessation, which is one of the most complicated and hard to understand aspect of the Buddhist teachings. And today we're going over another, probably the other aspect of the Buddhist teachings that is hardest to comprehend. And it's both for the same reason. Because these must be experienced. If you try to intellectually understand it, you won't get far. And it's a concept in the suttas where somebody tried to understand something and the Buddha says that they wouldn't be able to do so, their head would explode. They would become vexed and their head would explode. So today we're going over a topic that also needs a bit of preamble, as it were. Last week, I went over, before I dove into dependent origination and cessation, I went over what really is the logical origin for this. That is anicca, impermanence, instability, undependability. And so the what I had shown you last week was how, because the Buddha tells us that all conditioned things arise due to causes and cease due to causes. And all of those causes are anicca. All conditioned things are unstable, undependable, impermanent. So I debate as to whether I should go so deep on anicca again. I'm sure there's a good chunk of you who probably heard the talk last week, but some of you might not have heard. And so I want to maybe do a bit more streamlined talk on anicca. The Buddha tells us that whether a Tathagata exists in the world or not, there are these three characteristics of existence: anicca, dukkha, anatta. Now, what is anicca? It is the law of nature. The Buddha says whether a Tathagata exists in the world or not, this is a fixed law of Dhamma. Sabbe sankhara anicca. All conditioned things. There's only one thing that's unconditioned. That's why it's called the unconditioned. That's nibbana. Everything else is conditioned. Everything you are, everything you will experience, everything in the world, it's all conditioned. And because of this, it's unstable. It's undependable. It is liable to change. The Buddha, when he wants us to investigate how things are, to see things as they are, one of the frameworks he points us towards is to see how things arise, they persist for a time, and then they cease. They arise, they persist for a time, and then they cease. There is no such thing as anything that is permanent, stable, everlasting. No such thing. This goes against the law of nature, the law of Dhamma, that there could ever be such a thing that doesn't change, that doesn't rise and fall, that doesn't come to be and then cease. There cannot be. As a matter of fact, however, the topic for today is one of those places where it's so pernicious that even in Buddhism, over the millennia, there have arisen different doctrines and different perspectives that really skirt around that there is some kind of permanent essence. But in the suttas, Buddha is very, very clear. No such thing. Think of it, think of the logical progression of things. The Buddha starts out with everything is conditioned. There's nothing that's permanent, stable, and dependable. Nothing. No exceptions. And so it logically follows that anatta would make sense. There's nothing that's permanent, stable, and dependable. Oh, but there's, I have a soul. This is me. I have a permanent essence. This is me. I feel it. I can see it. I know it. It's me. It's me. This person in this life that goes from life to life. Buddha says no such thing. So to really understand anatta, you have to understand, you have to go back to the basics and understand anicca. Anicca, and fully really understanding anicca, is the basis for all insight and wisdom, because it all flows naturally from that. Anicca is, impermanence. It's a nice buzzword. Everybody and their mother, even outside of Buddhist circles, people say everything's impermanent and all these kind of things. I'm not a big fan of the word because it's kind of lost its meaning. It's been overused. And that is one of the definitions. When you hear me always say unstable, undependable, that's also part of that definition. And I think it makes it very clear that there's no permanent, everlasting thing in the universe. Hello, Sud. Hello, Upasaka Mudita. And so when we start from there, oh, yeah, I know anicca. Then you look inside your mind and you watch, and what happens? These are my thoughts. This is my pain. I'm experiencing this, so I'm suffering. You just watch how you have an automatic assumption that whatever is arising is me, mine, myself. It's not even a question. You can see this even after, I mean, I've been doing this, I've been a Buddhist 15 years, and I've been meditating a couple years before that. You know, even still, I'm not awakened, so I still, will take things for granted in my mind. It's like, oh yeah, this is mine. And I have to say, whoa, whoa, if I'm very mindful, I could say, well, are you sure? Really? You questioning that? Or are you just assuming it? You know what happened? You know what they say when someone assumes? So the Buddha has us question these things. And because it's short, I do want to go over the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta because it's important to understand the frameworks through which the Buddha, if you want to say, makes his argument or how to investigate these things. So let me share screen. This is the second teaching of the Buddha, right after the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. The characteristics of non-self. So I guess one thing I should do, which I didn't do, was talk about the word anatta. In Pali, when you want to negate the meaning of a word, essentially make it its opposite, you put an A in front of it. Or if there's already a vowel, you put an AN. So N, atta. And so then that makes you question, okay, so whatever anatta is the negation of atta. So what's atta? Well, in the Sanskrit, in the Brahmanical and Hindu tradition, the word is Atman. The Atman is a soul, a permanent being of light. That's you. That's the Atman. This being, and even it's like in the shape of a little human figure. And it goes into your body when you're conceived or whatever in the womb. And then it only leaves your body when you go to sleep or you're unconscious or you die. And of course, we know very well, very famously, that the idea, even go back to the Brahmanical times, is to reunite your Atman with Brahma, the creator God. So the Buddha comes into the scene and it's a foregone conclusion that we all have Atman. The idea is to reunite with Brahma. The Buddha says, no, 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 not Atta, Anatta, which is a very, very revolutionary thing. As somebody who was an anthropology major and who studied many different religions, even some most people have never heard of, it can't really come to mind any other religion that denies essentially the idea of a soul. The Buddha was very revolutionary in this in his time and day, but even to the in the modern day right now, it's still a very revolutionary concept. So let's read the sutta. Again, like I said, it's very short, but I want to point to you what the Buddha is saying here. Thus have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was dwelling at Varanasi in the deer park at Asipatina. There the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus, a group of five thus. Bhikkhus, Venerable Sir, those bhikkhus replied. The Blessed One said this. Bhikkhus, form is not self. Or I think this is Bhikkhu Bodhi translation, so non-self. For if bhikkhus form were self, this form would not lead to affliction. And it would be possible to have it of form, let my form be thus, let my form not be thus. But because form is not self, form leads to affliction. And it is not possible to have it of form, let my form be thus, let my form not be thus. Feeling, perception, volitional formations, consciousness is not self. For if bhikkhu's consciousness were self, this consciousness would not lead to affliction, and it would be possible to have it of consciousness. Let my consciousness be thus, let my consciousness not be thus. But because consciousness is non-self, consciousness leads to affliction, and it is not possible to have consciousness, have it of consciousness, let my consciousness be thus, let my consciousness not be thus. So, this is the first argument that the Buddha is making. You think that you have, that this is yourself? How come you have no power over it? Let my five aggregates, let my form, feeling, perception, consciousness, volitional formations, let them be this way. I want them to be that way. Do they listen? Some people might say, oh, yeah, I have control. I can make my arms go this way. I can do all kinds of things with my body. And my response is, okay, you can. That's an okay trick. Try this trick. Tell your body not to grow old. Tell your body not to get sick. Tell your body not to die. Can you do that? Do you have that power? Then is it really yours? It's quite an interesting line of questioning and investigation, isn't it? What power do you really have? What mastery do you really have over these things? And so, after going this argument, this framework, the Buddha moves on. What do you think, bhikkhus? Is form, and so we're going to go through the five aggregates again: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Are these five aggregates permanent or impermanent? Anicca, or anicca? Anicca, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Dukkang or sukhang? Dukkang, Venerable Sir. It's suffering. It's unsatisfactory. Why? Because when you cling to something that is anicca, that is subject to change, impermanent, unstable, once it changes, when it slips out of your fingers, when it turns into something happens where you don't like it, you suffer. We expect something from an impermanent world that an impermanent world cannot give us. And so we set ourselves up like putting a mine, putting a booby trap right in front of us. We set ourselves up for suffering. What's this? One of these memes these days. It's like it goes. The meme starts with the person says something, and then they're riding a bike, and then they put a stick right through the wheel, and they fall, and they say, "Oh, why did that happen?" That's us. Pretty much every minute of every day, we are just sabotaging ourselves because take we believe that what is permanent what is impermanent is permanent. That we can somehow fool or trick the system, but we can't. This is why what is impermanent is suffering. And so then the Buddha makes another argument. Is what is impermanent, suffering, and subject to change, to be regarded as thus: this is mine, this I am, this is myself. Bhikkhus respond, no, venerable sir, which is the right answer. So if I have no mastery, if these things are always changing, impermanent, unstable, attaching to them brings suffering, can this really be me? Can this be mine? Can this be myself? No, venerable sir. So that's the second framework that the Buddha has, the second argument the Buddha has for us to question and investigate our experience. And so then the Buddha says, therefore, bhikkhus, any kind of form whatsoever, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all form, all feeling, all form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. This is actually something that you are reflecting on. You're questioning this. The Buddha says, when you see with wisdom, this is what you see. So you're not wise yet. That's okay. See if you can, though. You investigate, you question. Is this mine? Is this me? Is this myself? In my early days at Bhavana Society, or like before I moved there to become a monk, when I was visiting there, I visited there for 3 years doing retreats and 4-day weekends and things like that. One of my first retreats, Bhante Jayasara, who was a teacher there, he gave an interesting technique. It's really the Buddhist technique, but I had never heard anybody give this to somebody to use as a reflection before. And the reflection was this: whenever something arose, you do the 6 factors. This is impermanent. This is suffering. This is not self, soullessness. This is not me. This is not mine. This is not myself. And I did that. I said, oh, this is an interesting thing. Oh, this pain arises. Oh, it's not me. It's not mine. It's not myself. This itch arises. This feeling, this emotion, these things that are arising, like the tide of an ocean going in and out, or a stream through your consciousness, thoughts and emotions and all kinds of things arising and ceasing. This is impermanent. This is unsatisfactory. This is soulless. This is not me. This is not mine. This is not myself. Try that. Use that as a framework. A couple times a day, you can remember to do that. I suggest that, using that as a framework. And so, one thing I didn't mention actually was this word soullessness. It was actually Bhante Silananda who had used this. And I'm like, soullessness? That's like sounds like a horrible translation of anatta. What is he using soullessness? But then I look it up in the dictionary, and one of the ways you translate anatta is soullessness. And it actually warmed up to me because I thought, you know what? This is actually the best English translation. Why? Because everybody knows what a soul is. When you say not self, no self, you get lost in semantics. But soullessness points directly to the point of anatta. What do we think of as a soul? Some permanent essence. It's me. When I go to the next life, it'll be me. You ever see, there was a movie that came out a bunch of years ago called Cloud Atlas. And it was about this group of people who, get reborn over and over again. And it's like Tom Hanks and an Asian woman. And I think there was a black gentleman and stuff like that. And in different lives, they were like different races and different things, but it was still that, like, you could tell it was like makeup. And so it looked like, the person, but they had a different skin color, they made him look Asian or whatever. And it was so silly. It looked really bad. I didn't care for them, to be honest with you. But what it reminds me of is this view, this thought that we have that in the next life, it'll be me. Most of me will be in the next life. No. Almost nothing of what you think is you will go to the next life. Most of you know I always make the joke, if I don't become at least a stream mentor in this life, I'm a human male this life, and that's what I identify as. I'm a human male. But my next life, if I don't become a stream mentor, I could be a female kangaroo. How much of Joe the layperson or Bhante J the monastic is going to be in that female kangaroo? Almost nothing. But man, I'm really identified to this. I remember meditation, this maybe probably like 10 years ago now, 11, 12 years ago, where I really had that insight, like, why am I so attached to this person now? This human male? Is that really me? Yeah, that was a really kind of interesting insight and line of questioning that I had all those years ago. Is that really you, yourself? You question these things. All right. So soullessness is simply pointing to the point, to right to the heart of it. There's no permanent essence you. You're fooling yourself. And we'll check out some lines of suttas a little bit later on, where not just the Buddha, but other practitioners say just this. So let's finish out with Anatta. So any kind of form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness should be seen with wisdom as thus. This is not mine. This is not me. This is not myself. Seeing thus, bhikkhus, the instructed noble disciple experiences revulsion towards form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Experiencing revulsion, he becomes dispassionate. And this is one of those, I think maybe Bhikkhu Bodhi has changed in the many years since he translated this, but revulsion is just a really bad translation. Because again, while technically correct, the average English speaking person, that when they think of revulsion, they think of something really disgusting or think of like puking and things like that. But this is just actually like a pushing away. You're not intoxicated by it anymore. This is nibbida. Nibbida is disenchantment, right? Um, and then when you have a disenchantment, you have dispassion, which is right here. And through dispassion, the mind is vimutti, liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge is liberated. He understands, destroyed his birth. The holy life has been lived, and what had to be done has been done. There's no more for this state of being. And then first five disciples became awake. Hello, Bill, Edward, Maria. Did I say hello to Jay? I think I did. All right. So that's Anatta Lakkhana Sutta. That's the basic argument, the basic logical flow from anicca. If everything is impermanent, unstable, undependable, there's nothing permanent, unchanging, and everlasting. What makes you think that there's this permanent, unchanging essence, this soul, this being? You question that. That's what anatta is. There's a kind of misconception that anatta is a eureka moment. One moment you just fully understand that I have a permanent soul. It's me. It's my atta. And then all of a sudden, anatta. That's not how it works. It's a slow unveiling. It's a slow questioning of everything. You see, oh no, that's not me. Okay, that's one thing off the list. The way I kind of the simile that I like to use is like there's an iceberg and you have a little ice pick and you're just picking off pieces of ice. And after a couple thousand lifetimes of picking off pieces of ice, you have broken down the whole iceberg. What's inside the iceberg? Nothing. Just so an awakened being has gone through the process of investigating and understanding everything in their experience. And they've seen behind the curtain that there's no me there. There's no mine. There's no myself. This is only something that arises with experience. And once you start to have the first glimpses, then you really start to question. I think many of you might have heard my story about my first glimpse of anatta, and some of you may have not. But this is going back. This is going. I mean, it's funny when I think of lay life now. Lay life is literally almost 10 years away. I moved to the monastery to become a monk in 2014. So a year from now will be 10 years that I left lay life. So when I think back, like, okay, 10 plus maybe 3, 4, maybe almost 14 years ago now, 13 years, I don't know. I had this experience, and so I was at work, and I had a break. I'd like to go do some walking, and it was basically walking meditation, not like the traditional line back and forth. I do walks. I would walk around my office building, and I would be mindfully paying attention to my feet and stuff, doing that. And as I started the walk, my mind wanted to sing. So I was like, okay, we don't need to sing. We're meditating. But it wanted to sing. And I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. You sing. I'm going to follow my feet. And so my mind upset for some reason that day. And I have this is still to this day, for this is just how my mind works. Just a random song, often songs that I never really intentionally listened to in my life, comes into my mind. And I try to find the reason why, and a lot of times I can't find the causes and conditions for that specific song. But that this tends to happen if you're a lifelong musician and things like that. But the song that my mind wanted to sing was "Sweet Caroline" by Neil Diamond. Yeah, "Sweet Caroline." Dun, dun, dun. And so I'm like, okay, fine, whatever, man. You sing, I'm gonna follow my feet. And as I was following my feet, like doing basic walking meditation practice. After a couple minutes, it was kind of a shock to me when I noticed that my mind was completely silent and it stayed silent. And that was the first time in my life where my mind stayed silent. Most people don't experience this ever in their whole lives. And with the one exception, when you're in a flow state, like if you're, sewing or doing some kind of activity and your mind is really focused, nothing much will be in the mind because you're totally focused on that activity you're doing. But all I was doing was just following my feet. And my mind went silent and it stayed silent and it stayed silent for so long that I started to question, wait a second. I thought those thoughts were me. And who's this, like, observing the thought that the thoughts are not there? What's going on? It was really confusing to me at first, actually for a couple of years. But what I realized now was that that was my first insight, that something that I just automatically assumed my whole life. I just never even thought to question that a thought arising in my mind might not be me. But that insight was the first start of my questioning. Hmm, I thought those were mine. They were me, but it doesn't seem like it because I'm still here. Of course, there's actually no I'm either, but this is part of, as you're working through this to try to understand. The only being who has fully broken through Anatta is an awakened being. Until then, you still have that little conceit called I am. I think, therefore I am. You still have that little conceit. This is, I know, like a sotipaner or maybe a non-returner, once returner. They will have seen in all of their experience, in their mind, in their body, everything. This is not me. This is not myself. I understand that, but there's still this little niggling thing in their mind. I know that none of this is me. Somehow there's something somewhere. I exist somehow. So this is not an easy thing. You can say maybe that experience of the mind going quiet was the first ice pick into the iceberg. least in this life. I mean, I hope I I worked the iceberg down a little bit in previous lives, but who knows? And so ever since then, it's questioning, okay, this is this me? Is this mine? Is this myself? Let me see. Let me investigate. Let me question. And then you investigate and you see deeply. Well, that's another one off the list. Let's keep investigating. And what that does is give you a freedom that is unmatched. Because something arises in your mind and you're like, oh, okay, I don't have to accept this. I don't have to just blindly follow it. I can question it. What does the normal person do? Normal person, something happens, they get angry, they act. Something happens, they get fearful, they act. Something happens, they get lustful, they act. Once you are investigating these things and you start to break through a little bit to anatta, anger arises. Why am I angry? Is it worth it being angry? Is there any real reason why I'm angry? Or is it just some misperception or some stupidity on my part? Why am I fearful? Right? So you're questioning you just don't, you automatically, it just doesn't arise. And then, oh man, I'll tell you another story. This is actually about Bhavana and Bhante Silananda. This goes back. This wasn't. This was maybe a year later. I'm at a metta retreat with Bhante Silananda at Bhavana Society, and a little hint for me: I hate guided meditations. I actually get agitated if I have to listen to guided meditations. I do not like guided meditations. Um, and so I'm at a metta retreat. I'm in a meditation hall with 40 other people. We're in the middle of a retreat. And Bhante Silananda is doing a metta, guided metta, and it was very drony, and I didn't care for it. And really agitated me. May all beings be well, happy and peaceful. And it was over and over again. And here I'm like mentally, I'm like blasting out metta to all beings. And I'm like trying to practice like, my metta, and especially in the early days, was really powerful. I loved metta practice. But as I'm trying to blast out metta to all beings, I'm getting agitated. And I'm like, come on, Bhante. God, be quiet. And then I had, because I'm a visual thinker. I don't think in words. Like if something comes up in my mind to do something, it's an image of me doing it. So as I'm trying to be blissed out for all beings in metta, an image comes in my mind of me getting up from my meditation cushion, going up to the front of the hall, and punching Bhante Silananda in the face. Keep in mind, this is a monk who, even at that point, I loved and had lots of metta for, and still to this day, I love Bhante Silananda. But even all these years later, I reflect on what a normal person, or shall I say, an untrained person, would react in that situation. Especially if it was like a Buddhist person, like a Sri Lankan person or a Thai person or whatever. Oh boy. Could you imagine what would come into your mind if you had an image of punching out a monk? Well, you know what happened to me? This was at least a year after my start of, after the story that I said before. I had to stop myself from bursting out laughing in the middle of a meditation with 40 other in the middle of a retreat during a guided meditation. I almost literally burst out laughing that I had this image. come into my mind of me going out and punching out a monk. Why? Because I had gotten to the point where I realized this is not me. This is not mine. It's just a thought that's arisen due to agitation in the mind and all these conditions. Then part of your mind is like, well, this is how you deal with something. You kill it. This is how you stop something. Knock it out. Right. And of course, obviously, you're just like, well, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. So it was so absurd and so funny to me. I was laughing and giggling because I didn't take it as me. I didn't take it as mine. You have that choice. Once you really start to understand, you can see, oh, no, I don't need to accept this. I don't need to act on this. I can choose to act in a more mindful and skillful way. That's a power that starting to see anatta gives you. Very freeing thing. This is why some people, they get worried that they're going to lose themselves, or they think that it's like what's the psychological condition? Um, Not depersonalization, like where you kind of like trying to think of the psychological condition, like where you kind of have like a break of your personality kind of a thing. That's not how it works. It's just simply understanding that, yeah, this is arisen due to causes and conditions. And we talked about this dependent origination last week, right? Dissociative disorder. Thank you, Sue. Yes. Because I understand that this is arisen due to causes and conditions, guess what? I can choose to act in such a way that these causes and conditions can move towards the skillful. And so this is actually one of my telltale when I meet a monastic or even a layperson, when I meet a practitioner, one of my telltale signs that somebody has some pretty advanced practice is how seriously they take themselves or everything around them. And I don't mean like in a stupid, jokey way that like has no bearing on, you know, norms and things like that. But I mean, you can tell that they just don't take themselves that seriously. Something happens, they don't get so uptight about it. Somebody tries to goad them or get them to be angry or whatever, just doesn't work. I've met such people. I have. It's not as common as I would like, but that to me is a sign that they've had some deep insight. All right. So we have a little bit of time left. I want to cover a few more things before I end. So this is a huge topic, and I'm trying to balance between like dry scholarly and you know personal and kind of experience. Um, but I do need to show this to kind of explain to you, well, because people will say one of the most common questions is, well, if there's no self, then what gets reborn? The absolute most common question in all of Western Buddhism. I don't know if it's the same in Eastern Buddhism, but it definitely among Westerners, it's the most. I've heard that question asked dozens of times, and I've answered it myself at least a couple dozen times. Let me share screen here. Vajira. This is in Samyutta Nikaya 510. At Savatthi, the nun Vajira, robed up in the morning, taking her bowl and robe, entered Savatthi for alms. She wandered for alms in Savatthi. After the meal. On her return from alms round, she went to the dark forest, plunged deep into it, and sat at the root of a tree for the day's abiding. Then Mara the wicked, wanting to make the nun Vajira feel fear, terror, and goosebumps, wanting to make her fall away from immersion, went up to her and addressed her in verse. Who created this sentient being? Where is its maker? Where has the being arisen? Where does it cease? Then the nun Vajira thought, who's speaking this verse, a human or non-human? Oh, okay. Then she thought, this is Mara the wicked, wanting to make me feel terror and goosebumps, wanting to make me fall away from immersion. Then Vajira, knowing that this was Mara the wicked, replied to him in verse. Why do you believe there's such a thing as sentient being? Mara, is this your theory? This is just a pile of conditions. You won't find a sentient being here. When the parts are assembled, we use the word chariot. So too, when the aggregates are present, sentient being is the convention we use. But it's only suffering that comes to be, lasts a while, then disappears. Naught but suffering comes to be, naught but suffering ceases. Then Mara the wicked, thinking the nun Vajira knows me, miserable and sad, vanished right there. That's a very, very powerful, amazing response by this bhikkhuni. This is just a pile of aggregates. This body, this mind that we all call Bhante Jay is nothing but causes and conditions that have arisen. And because it has arisen, it will cease. The Buddha actually, well, I think this is in a couple suttas, but the one that comes to mind is actually not the Buddha. I think it's either Ananda or Sariputta is asked, identity. What is identity? And the response is the Buddha has said that identity is these Panchupadana Kanda, these 5 aggregates subject to clinging. 5 aggregates subject to clinging. Where have we heard that before? Do you know? Where is that in the definition of? This is dukkha. Birth is dukkha. Aging is dukkha. Sickness is dukkha. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are dukkha. Not getting what you want is dukkha. Being separated from what you love is dukkha. Having to deal with what you don't love is dukkha. In short, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are dukkha. The Buddha is literally saying the minute we have suffering, the minute we create an identity, we create suffering. This is why the Buddha says that you literally create your own suffering. Nobody can create suffering. Nobody causes you to suffer. You have started your suffering by creating your identity. How does one create an identity? They see this form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness. They cling to it as me. as mine, as myself. That is the very instant of creating suffering. Identity and suffering are just like this. They're intertwined. You can't have one without the other. What are the aggregates, but simply the aspects of this psychophysical organism, this mind and body that has come together? All of it conditioned, all of it subject to change, arising and decaying. And you get born and you start to grow. You start from one cell and you start to grow. And then you come out of the womb and eventually you get a name and your family members call you this name. And then as you get older, not even that much older, like you talk about like before a year old, you're starting to have likes and dislikes. You're starting to have this is me, this is not me. This is my personality, this is not. I like this, I don't like that. And you build up this character, like a character in a video game or a movie or a play. You build up this character, you make up this character, and you keep doing that. Never once questioning what's really behind all this. Is this true? Two of my favorite Pali words are manyati and papancha. Manyati literally means imagining. So we imagine up, we create this identity, in the process causing our suffering, and then we propagate it. We continue it. This is what we do. This is the origin of our suffering. We turn 5 aggregates into clinging, craving aggregates. We put much more into these aggregates than is actually there. We manyati it. We imagine it. We invest. We create it. And so, part of following the Noble Eightfold Path, developing in wisdom and insight, you are unraveling this identity. It's just causes and conditions. Because I was born Italian in New Jersey, and I have such and such ancestors, and I'm from such and such a place, and I have such and such experiences, I have such and such views, such and such perceptions. That's me. Mm. Or is it? I don't know about that. Investigate and question. That's the important thing. And one more to close out. Just a few lines. This it? Yeah, this is it. The noble ones have seen as happiness the ceasing of identity. The view of those who clearly see runs counter to the entire world. Remember when the Buddha said this practice goes against the stream, he meant it all the way, right? What is the highest happiness? The destruction of the in the daily chanting at Bhavana and when I do my Monday through Friday daily chanting on the YouTube channel. One of the things we always chant is the destruction of the conceit I am is the highest bliss. So the noble ones have seen as happiness the ceasing of identity. The view of those who clearly see runs counter to the entire world. What others speak of as happiness, the noble ones say is suffering. What others speak of as suffering, the noble ones know as bliss. Behold, this Dhamma is hard to comprehend. But just because we have this chariot, the parts when they come together are just a chariot. Human being, when the parts come together, just a human being. All right, time for questions. So we have time if you like any questions about this topic, about Buddhism in general, about meditation, etc. You're welcome to ask questions. So what am I? What is this being? Simply the coming together of causes and conditions. What you are is a continuous process. We slap a label on that continuous process. We slap a label on the arising of the five aggregates and the ceasing of the five aggregates. That's what you are according to Buddha. Hello, Andrew. Okay, Sud is always good for a question or two. Sud never disappoints when it comes to Q&A time. This is the great lecture freedom. Okay, question. How does one make intellectual understanding of this a reality? Does it automatically happen as one follows the Noble Eightfold Path? If you are honestly and sincerely following the Noble Eightfold Path, yes, this is what happens. Because what you're doing on the path is questioning and investigating. That's what mindfulness is. The 7 factors of awakening. The first one is mindfulness. The second one is investigation of all phenomena, of all dhammas. So you're mindfully investigating, mindfully understanding, mindfully exploring your experience. And you see behind the curtain, you see that what you once took for granted as me, mine, myself doesn't seem like that anymore. So yes, if you follow the Noble Eightfold Path, it is expected that this is what you will come to. You will understand with wisdom that this is not me. This is not mine. This is not myself. Any good advice for facing my own shadow? I'm going to take a Jungian perspective on this. I'm assuming you mean like your own dark side. I don't know. You can clarify that if you like. But so one of the things that you observe when you watch your mind is that there are different parts of the mind. The Thanissaro Bhikkhu Ajahn Jeff calls this the committee of the mind. And there is a part of your mind, you call it the lizard brain part, whatever you want to call it. There's a part of your mind that sees a problem and its solution is kill, destroy. I have literally, dealing with somebody who was quite sociopathic and abusive and gaslighting of me. And a part of my mind is, oh, this is a simple problem. Just kill him. Oh, wow. Right? So there's a part of your mind that stuff will arise. That shouldn't be a surprise. Most people have stuff in their mind that they will never admit to to other people because they think that I must be crazy, ridiculous, evil, whatever, that this has arisen in my mind. The problem is the more you avoid that and deny it, the more power it has. And when it arises, the more it takes you by surprise. But when you reflect in your mind that you have, I remember when I was young and, naive, but from a young age, I loved history. So I started learning. I'm talking about from like 9 or 10 years old. I literally was like a 10-year-old watching History Channel about like the Holocaust and World War II and things like this. And that kind of how humans could do things to humans. Then you learn like Genghis Khan's army could kill a million civil, like could kill literally a whole metropolis in one day. Like the soldiers would line up and there would just be lines of people that they would just each soldier had to like cut the heads off of 100 people in a day. Phew, 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 phew. Like when you like look at this, the normal tendency is like, oh, I'm a good person. I could never do this. Blah, blah, blah. But the real truth of it is, if you were that person in that time, in that situation, most likely you would. That's the real truth because most people did. Very few people, actually, most people think I'd be the one who would save the Jews. I wouldn't be the Nazi camp guard. Most likely you'd be the Nazi camp. That's what you realize when you really look in your mind and you really understand the mind and how things work. You realize, oh yeah, there's a capability for me to do lots of papa, evil. Papa is the Pali word for evil. It's definitely there. You shouldn't deny it. The more you deny it, the more power it has over you. The more surprised you are when it arises. When you have that thought, be better off if they were just killed or dead. Sure, that's one way of thinking at it, but since I live in modern society, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna take that advice. There's more mindful, skillful ways of doing things than that, right? It's just what has arisen in my mind. I also had to I worked for 10 years child protective services. I had to sit across people who had molested young children and killed people and did all kinds of stuff. And part of the way I could be empathetic or humanistic towards them is kind of taking on their actions and reflecting on that in my own mind. I've let my mind go to some really dark places in my life. And what's that old Nietzschean quote? Beware of looking into the abyss because sometimes the abyss stares back at you. Thankfully, I've been wise enough to not go too deep, but I've gone fairly deep. Um, and I think that's also part of why I have such more compassion and empathy for all beings than the average person. Because the Buddha's compassion and empathy and metta is for all beings without exemption. Not this person deserves my compassion, that person doesn't. No such thing in Buddhism. Or no such thing in terms of the Buddha's compassion, transcendent compassion. So it's really important to, I like that term with that Jungian thing, integrate the shadow. What that means is you understand that you can do lots of bad things. You are capable of these things, and you choose to be mindful and act skillful. That's much more powerful and wise than I'm just going to pretend this doesn't exist. All right. And Jake says, when I meet kind and amazing teachers, my mind keeps cursing at them. It's okay. You can curse at me all you want. I won't. I won't take offense. Just reflect on the causes and conditions for the arising of that internal cursing. Ah, just going through the comments here. Ah, Rick, yeah. Rick doesn't have a question, but he does. He's making an interesting comment about how an experience he had about his legs when he was younger, and like, would he still be himself if his legs were amputated, etc. These kind of things. If your leg or your arm or your finger was amputated, would that piece of body that's lying there, would that be you? It reminds me of one of the most famous similes that the Buddha uses for anatta. The Buddha says, if if you were to go into the forest and start picking and taking away sticks and grass and things, would people yell, "Oh no, you're taking me away"? No. Just like so, if your five aggregates were to be taken away, would that you be, "Oh no, these are me. You're taking these away." No. Wow, I got it. I'm just my sense experiences, not even that. There's nowhere. So the Buddha says, we went over sabbe sankara anicca. All conditioned things are impermanent. The Buddha says sabbe dhamma anatta. All phenomena in existence is not self soullessness. There is nowhere that is you. You're not even your experiences. They're simply experiences. Bhante Sud has another question. Is it so that when practice of metta, do you eliminate the further condition of birth when you may be forced to be a soldier fighting a war, etc.? Um, I'm a bit confused as to what you're asking. Let me read that again. If you want to clarify anything, that would probably be appreciated. When you practice metta, do you eliminate future condition of birth? Oh, okay. Oh, no, I understand now. I understand. No, you don't. No. Um, because remember, you have an unlimited number of karma from unlimited numbers of past lives. So you might be a meta master in one life, and you're not a sotipana, you're not awakened. The next life, you're born in a war torn country, in the middle of a world war or whatever, and you're drafted and you're a soldier and all that kind of stuff. So no, that's practicing lots of metta and developing that karma is not necessarily going to mean that you're never going to have to be you know in a war in a future life. That's not the case. It's definitely, if you plan on sticking around for another million lifetimes, practicing lots of metta will definitely minimize your future lives where you are in that, for sure. Per se, maybe there might be some momentum you build up, but I don't think that it would eliminate it completely. It's really all hearsay. There's really nothing. There's no actual like direct, clear answer from the suttas in that per se. Um, but yeah, all right. Jay says, "What do you think about the self being a mental construct and the processes of mind being the thing that gets reborn. Though to be a soul, but are ever changing, impermanent, etc. So, not even the five aggregates really go to the next life. It's really a different set of five aggregates. This is the only thing that the Buddha really says go there's only he doesn't really talk about it a lot, but in a few suttas, like when he's talking to a layperson, he'll say, "Fear not, for when somebody has done lots of good in this life, when you die, everything is left here, and the mind goes on to distinction." So the Buddha talks about the mind going forward. And some people, like Bhante Jayasara, like I've mentioned him like what 8 times today. I might as well do it again. He would say something like it's a very subtle version of the five aggregates. Some people say that that's supported in the suttas. Some don't. I'm on the side that I don't think that's supported per se. Um, but it's really there's no real clear. So different people think different things. But I wouldn't get too attached to thinking anything gets reborn. What is people will ask, well, what do you mean by the Buddha says the mind goes forward? What's that? Is that consciousness? Is this, that, this? But as far as I understand, the five aggregates are not the same five aggregates. Right? Consciousness is one of the five aggregates. But some people equate consciousness with mind. Gets really complicated. This is extremely deep, complicated stuff that I can't even say I'm very clear on because, again, it's not very clear in the sutras. So, again, different people have different perspectives. But when a person has become awakened, or a person who might become awakened at death, when they have let go of everything, then everything becomes unraveled. There's nothing to hold on to anything, and it's parinibbana. You have to let go of everything, thinking that any aspect of any form of your existence or experience is any kind of permanence. So this is a good question too. I don't know that there's a clear answer. What is the reasoning behind why does becoming a sotapanna eliminate bad rebirths? I don't think I've ever actually heard anybody be asked this question before. Not Bante. I mean, I've been with Bante G during probably at least 100 of his Q&As. And I don't think I've ever seen this asked. Really interesting question. What exactly is it that eliminates bad rebirths? You could say, oh, it's because they've abandoned identity view. They've abandoned, they've abandoned attachment to, viewing that rites and rituals that in and of themselves will bring you to awakening. They've abandoned their doubt. Okay. But they're still subject to the karma of past lives. So I don't even know if that does it. Unless there's some special there's some special path that a Sotapanna unlocks upon destroying three of the feathers. Right? That's the only thing I can maybe think about. Right? So you have these 10 chains that keep you in the samsaric state. Sotapanna has destroyed three. They've weakened it. They've had a glimpse of nibbana. So maybe it's the fact that they've broken three of the fetters that why they can't be reborn in a woeful state. It's a good question. I would really love to hear like a Bhante G or a Bhikkhu Bodhi or Ajahn Brahm or a Bhante Analayo answer that question. That would be a really interesting question, um, to hear one of those, you know, senior, well-known monastics answer that. Hmm. Thank you, by the way. I love when people give me a question because, I mean, I've been doing Q&As for 9 years, you know, or something like that, almost 8 years. Yeah, almost 8, yeah. Basically, as a Samanera, I started. So yeah, almost. So basically, 8 years I've been doing Q&As, and it's always really nice when somebody asks me a question that I've never heard answered, and I've never had to answer before because it really makes me think. I really appreciate when somebody can give me a question like that. It's quite rare. So, Sud, if you ever do get a chance to ask what Bhikkhu Bodhi or one of the monastics I mentioned, I would definitely be interested in hearing that answer. All right, friends. Well, it is 9 o'clock for me, so that is the end of this session. And it's always nice to be here doing sessions with Buddhist Insights. I don't know when I'll be doing it again. I might be spending a week or two in the beginning of December at Empty Cloud, so they might drag me into things then. So you might see me again in December. Um, we'll see. But it's always good to be with the Buddhist Insights community. Nice to see old faces that I've gotten to know over the 3 years or so that I've been, involved. Actually, it's been 7 years that I've been involved with Buddhist Insights, leading retreats and things like that. But yeah. Anyway, friends, Sukhihotu. May you be well and at ease. Practice well and be well. May you have a spiritually successful and peaceful practice until we meet again. Have a good night or day, depending on where you are.